Hello, this is the first in a set of videos which will show how to implement and use array data structures in Java. So if you don't know what an array data structure is yet, you're in the right place because we're going to start right from the basics. We are assuming that you know how to declare and initialize variables and use them in your program. So with that in mind, let's take a look at a program I've kind of started here. So this program here, what it does is it's going to be designed to store the scores of 10 students. And those scores are going to be integer values. So if I have 10 students, I can make an integer variable for each of those students. So notice here score 1, score 2, score 3, score 4. Okay? Which would work. But it does present couple challenges. One of those challenges is actually manipulating those scores. So let's say, for example, I wanted to find the total of all the scores. Well, I could make a variable called total, and then I'd have to write in score 1 plus score 2 plus score 3, and I'd have to type them all in, which I could do, but that would take some time. And also, let's imagine that instead of 10 score values, you had 1,000 score values. It becomes very difficult to type in all that information just to find the total. So one data structure which is available is called an array. A data structure is just a way of organizing data. So what I can do here is, since all of these variables are the same type, I can create an array. So an array is a data structure that stores multiple variables of the same type. So to do that, we declare and initialize it as follows. We declare the type, and then I put brackets after it, and that indicates that I'm going to make an array of integers. Next is the name of that array, so we're going to call it scores. And now I have to actually tell the computer to make some space in memory to hold this information. So I put new. So new, you'll notice, changes color. That's because it's what's called a reserved word. And then I type in the type again, but now inside the brackets I put the number of values I want. So what this means is that I'm going to declare an array of integers. I'm going to call that array of integers scores, and then I tell the computer to go out and find 10 spaces in memory that are large enough to hold an integer value. So we often think of this like a picture. And so what happens here, if we think of this like a picture, this is what we envision. Just like when we store an integer. So let's imagine if I do int I equals 6. This is called a primitive variable. What it does is it stores the value 6 right there, right inside at that location in memory. However, if I declare an array of integers, so let's do the exact same one here, int scores equals new int, and then I specify I want 10 elements. An array is called a reference type, and the reason it's called a reference type is because in the variable location scores, it doesn't actually store the information. It stores a reference to where that information is stored. So what happens is, somewhere else in memory, the computer will go and find 10 spaces. Oh, we need one more. Find 10 spaces. So what happens is, if I try and access this, it's going to look at the variable location and then basically know where to go to find the information. So two words we want to make sure that we're comfortable with, and these are very important. So what we say here is that this array has 10 elements. So element 1, element 2, element 3, element 4, element 5, element 6, element 7, element 8, and element 9, element 10. But we also talk about this in terms of indexes. The way an array is numbered is it's always numbered from 0 to 1 minus the number of elements. So this would be index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4, 5, index 6, index 7, index 8, index 9. So what happens now is we're going to store information inside this data structure. So with a primitive variable, all we do is we say I is equal to 9. what happens is it comes up here, gets rid of what's in I, and puts a 9. Simple enough. But the question now is, well, how do I store information inside this array? So what I need to do is I need to not just name the variable, but I also have to give an index. So if I do this, score is equal to 9, what happens is it says, okay, we're talking about the variable score. Oh, sorry, scores. Pardon me. But then the question is, well, where do I put it? Do I put it in index 0, 1, 2? So what we do is when we access an array, we have to write the name of the array, and then we indicate the index. So if I say scores at index 0 is 9, it's going to put a 9 in there. If I say scores at index 9 is equal to 6, it's going to go scores, go to index 9 and put a 6. So what I can do now is I can put information in any position within this array. Now a good subtle point to know is that when we declare an array of integers, everything gets initialized to 0. 0, 0, 0. So let's take a look at our program and put this into practice. So what I can do now is, if I do something like this, system.out.println, and I'm going to print out scores at 0. So that's going to print out the value in the array scores at index 0. So it's printing out value at index 0, or the first element. Okay? Really want to stress again, distinguish between the term element and index. They are very important to it's very important you know the difference between an index and an element. So if I run this right now, I'm just going to get the value 0, because right now the array has been initialized to zeros. So by default, all values set to 0. So if I want to put something in here, I can do this. Scores at, say, 1 at 0, at index 0 is equal to, let's put a 9. So now if I run this, I get a 9. I could say scores at 4 is equal to 3, or 3. So I could do something like this. Print line scores at index 4, and I get both of them. Oh, what am I missing here? Oh, I missed a semicolon. So I run this, and there are my two values. So what I have now is a way of organizing data of the same type. And what we're going to learn as we move forward is that this allows for easy manipulation of this data, specifically using loop structures. So there's a little idea of what we're going to head into. One last point I want to get to before I wrap up. Remember, if I have 10 elements, the indexes go from 0 to 9. So the question is, what happens if I do this? There's no index 10, but I'm going to try and put scores at index 10. So scores at 10 we say is equal to 10. Watch what happens. When I run this, I get a very specific error. It's called array index out of bounds exception. You want to start looking for this error because this is a common error that you will get when you're trying to use arrays. It means that you're trying to access an index that doesn't exist. There is no index 10. So if we take a look at our picture here, notice indexes for scores goes from 0 to 9. There's no 10th index. And that's what's called an out of bounds exception. So watch for those because you're going to see them all the time in your work. I hope this video helped. If you have any questions as always, please let me know.